Hi, welcome to the Gamesplainer. I'm Jeff the Gamesplainer and today I'm Gamesplaining May. So, it has been a bizarre month. This is probably the month that I have spent the least amount of time playing games out of all months. I believe I've finished up with only about 28 games played and many of them were recycle games. So, my top 10 list is games I've played and there was a couple of others that got swept to the side. So you may see some games that normally wouldn't hit this top 10 list simply because there's so few games being played. So let's get straight into it. My number 10 game is City Skylines, the board game. City Skylines is a game that I probably wouldn't have played if I wasn't doing the explanations. It's not a game that really pulls me in, but it's an okay game, don't misunderstand me. I do enjoy playing it. I don't think that I would play it unless I was gamesplaining games that needed to do a game explanation of this particular game. It is built on the computer system, and the computer game system has some intricacies that you're working towards and working against. I find it really struggly, and that's probably the best way to approach a co-op game. This is co-op game, by the way. Is if it's struggling, it's probably working well. Let's keep moving. Number 9. My number 9 game is Planet. So I had a chance to play this as a 3-player experience. Up to this date, I've currently only played it as a 2-player experience. Having it played as 3 is a little bit more challenging, a little bit more to think about. But what I tend to find is that I focus on what I'm doing more than what the other players are doing. So it doesn't really make a huge difference, but it does in the end make a difference to the amount of cards you're going to get in, because various people are going to be going after different things. If you haven't seen Planet, it's about building up a planet over a certain number of rounds, and you're putting little tokens onto the planet, and you're looking for cards that are laid out on the table. There's a heap of cards laid on the table. They're telling you to go after the same or the largest area of one particular area type, but not next to something, or an area type next to something, things like that. It's a worthwhile game. I find it a little bit, I think there should be something more to it, but it is what it is. Let's keep moving. My number 8 game is X-Nimmt. Now, I think that X-Nimmt is a slightly better game than 6-Nimmt. 6-Nimmt is the granddaddy of X-Nimmt. It was really hard to find a copy of this. The rules are in German, so I'm assuming that rules haven't actually been published in English, so it gets harder to actually be able to find. X-Nimmt only plays to 4 players, whereas 6-Nimmt plays up to, I think, 10 from memory. X-Nimmt has a limited amount of time. There are 2 hands total, and there's a couple of little intricacies where you are not just taking the negative points from whatever cards you have to take, but you're putting those points into cards that are on the table in front of you, and only one of those cards that you've picked up is going to go down, the rest go back into your hand. So you can eventually tell what everyone has in their hands. The point when your X line on the table has to drop backwards, all the cards that were currently there get put over to be points, and that's where your negative points come from, more so than all of the other spots. I just find there's a nice little intricacy on this game that doesn't exist in 6-Nimmt, so X-Nimmt it is. My number 7 game is Era Medieval Age. Now, Era Medieval Age should work really well as a 4-player game. I've never once played it as the 4-player experience. I've only ever played it as 2-player. But playing it as 2-player, it still works really nicely. It's a roll and write, but you're not writing, you're building on your board with some little plastic miniature buildings. There is a bit of a quandary as to whether there's necessity for these buildings, but you know what? I really like them, so I'm going to say yes, there's a need for those buildings to be there, and it's a worthwhile thing for you to go after. On this particular game, I managed to play the game with getting dice, just heaps and heaps of dice, and it allowed me to do more and more stuff. The only thing when you're doing that, if you're going for heaps of dice, is you've got to make sure you can feed them. So I was having to put heaps of food spots around my board, and that gets a little bit tight after a while, but you're really banking on the attacky roll that comes in not hitting your guys too poorly, and you're having to play that game a little bit to see which way you're going to end up going. But look, Era is a wonderful game. I really like it. All these games so far, they've been a little bit, there's just a touch missing. I think Era, there's just a touch missing. It may be the 3rd or 4th player is missing for me. I don't know what it is, but let's keep moving and keep looking at these games. Game 6 is Fast Sloths. Fast Sloths is a game that will get a Gamesplainer this month, most likely. It's on my list to do a Gamesplainer of. It works pretty straightforward. Now, it plays up to 5 players. I've only played it as a 2-player experience so far, but it's a racing game in essence. It doesn't look like a racing game, doesn't feel like it should be a racing game, but in essence, it actually is just a racing game. I think that might be the little thing that's getting in the way of this game. In terms of my headspace, is I want it to be a bit more than it actually is. It also might be that I'm just been playing so far with the start cards. So there's a whole bunch of different animals that can be plotted around the board, and you as a sloth don't really want to move, so you're catching a lift with animals, and each animal can do something different. So the setup that I've been using for the last couple of games has been the same as that initial setup. There's a whole bunch of other cards that do a whole bunch of other stuff. So I wonder if going after those would change the game more dramatically. And also I think that playing with more players on this one would actually be a better experience than just a 2-player. It's wanting something. I think it's those other players. Game number 5 is Santorini. So Santorini has seen itself getting quite a few plays this month. I really like Santorini. I think it's a wonderful game. It is only a 2-player game, but it has ability to turn into a 3-player game. The problem with a 3-player game is it becomes a bit of a king-making game as a general rule. But the thing that really makes Santorini is the god powers. So you're playing a card that says you can do this thing throughout the game. And seeing what the other players' god powers are and working out a way to stop them from being able to use that power to help them win is actually what the game's about. I find that really good, and really there's a fun little up thing going on with it. I did trap someone in a space, and I felt a bit bad about that because they could trap me the turn before and they didn't. But that's the game. There is this trapping idea of elements. So if you've got 2 guys that are moving around the board. If you can get one of them from your opponent trapped so they can't move, then you only have to deal with one problem rather than the 2. My number 4 game for May is Cooper Island. Now, Cooper Island just had the Gamesplainer in the last couple of weeks. I said in that Gamesplainer I think the game is too tight, and I stand by that. I do think the game is too tight. Once again, I fear that I've only played as a 2-player experience. Playing it with more may change my opinion of that, but as a 2-player experience, it feels too tight. It's really, really hard to get the stuff that needs the money or things like that, and kind of getting your head around where to place things. I think it's probably going to take a few games to get into a space of being able to play it really well. I've played it well enough, but to play it really well and really grasp all of the concepts, it's probably going to take quite a few plays to revitalize that and to bring it into what it is. With Cooper Island, what you're doing is you're placing little tiles or hexes onto your board, and they give you food. Depending on how high up those tiles or hexes are, will change your ability to get food, or so the amount of food, should I say, or the amount of cloth or whatever the resource happens to be. You'll get more if you're higher up in terms of the stacking of the hexes. And there's a fun little game there. It feels like there's also a couple of other games going on, all pushed into the same bag. Cooper Island, I like it, but it is possibly too tight for my real ownership. My number 3 game is Blood Bowl. Now, it's been a little while since I played Blood Bowl. Blood Bowl is the only game that I've got as a 10 on my rating on Board Game Geek. And I think that's a nostalgia thing more than anything else. This is a game that I've lived with for a really long time, way before I knew about any of these games behind me. I really like it. I went to the extremes of actually getting all the teams when they did that final release, or they were closing down the release of the previous Blood Bowl type. So I haven't actually invested in any of the new stuff. I have had a look through the rule books of the new ones and found that it's the same. So I'm not going to worry about that little bit of difference in size. I'm happy with the 24 teams that I've got and working through that way. Blood Bowl's had a few plays this month, and I've actually really enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed this game. It's what it has about it, as opposed to all the other games, workshop games, is the ability for one game to directly affect your ability with that team in a future game. I really like that. It's almost a legacy style game in that what you do here will directly affect. You could call it campaign game. Either way is absolutely fine. There's just a nice funky build up on it. My number 9 game is Middle-earth strategy battle game, or Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is a game that I have been sitting on for a really long time. Way before I had these. Shorter time than Blood Bowl, but longer time than all of this stuff behind me. I hadn't played it for ages, and one of my friends said, hey, you've got that, we should play that. Now, I've really got that. I've got every miniature that you could want. I have enough miniatures to be able to do the Pelennor Field big thing. I think I've got about 5,000 points worth of miniatures. If you don't understand what points of miniatures are, have a look into what this style of gaming is about. But I upgraded and got the new version. The rules are really similar between the two. It's just the difference in the amount of guys you can put on the board with various elements. I've really enjoyed the game. I've got back into painting. I've got back into buying the miniatures and putting them together, all this other stuff that goes on. This is a lifestyle game, and that's really what it comes down to. I just need to make sure that I give enough time to these games and these videos to not get sucked into just doing Lord of the Rings. But there it is. Lord of the Rings is my number 9 game for May. I really appreciate it. So that brings me down to my number 1 game for May. My number 1 game for May is Brass Birmingham. It feels like this is an, as always, first top of the list type of game. It's a game that I really love, and I really love playing it again. I fairly substantially lost that game, but it's really good to lose a game that you really enjoy because you see other ways of coming at it. There's so much thinking going on in this game. Every game that I've talked about in this top 10 has had a review, with the exception of Lord of the Rings and Sloth. Sloth definitely will get a review in the next couple of weeks. Lord of the Rings, maybe, maybe not. I'll see how I feel about doing a review of that. I don't know if you guys want to actually see that or not, but it's a thing, so we'll see what happens. But Brass consistently comes to the top of my list of games I really enjoy playing. There's just something about, there's just an intricacy that just works. It has enough rules for it to be really thinky, but it's streamlined enough for it to not get stuck in, oh, what about this, what about this, what about this? There are 5 things you can do. And I think that's probably why I really like Brass. The streamlinedness of the game against how deep and dense the game actually is. Look, I will leave it there. That is my top 10 for May. Please go ahead and watch my Gamesplainers and Gamesplanations for the other games to see what you like, see what new types of things you would prefer for me to talk about. Please write below if you have any comments or suggestions. If you have any games that you would like to be gamesplayed, please shoot me an email to thegamesplainer@gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter @thegamesplainer to keep up to date with the games I'm playing. Subscribe to my videos to keep up to date with the games that I'm gamesplaining. And until next time, enjoy gaming.